Welcome everybody to another episode of SasqWatchers. It has been a while, but here we are on the Watchers Digital Network, and we have a pretty cool interview lined up, one that we've been trying to do for a long time. And I will let her introduce herself. As always, you guys know by now, after the extremely loud, so protect your ears.
Oh, not this one. I forgot about this one.
SasqWatchers intro.
Woo!
Podcast pioneers, unveiling the unknown with curious ears. From specters to Bigfoot, they dig deep. SasqWatchers on a quest that's unique.
That's a little cringe now.
And as loud as it is,
it actually wasn't that loud this time, but I had different earphones in. So
silent and abrupt. My cousin made that. I still like to use it because of that. So we are here with Amelia Cotter, and
you messed it up.
Amelia Cotter, and that's why I don't read bios. And she's gonna go ahead and describe her background a little less stupid than my introduction.
Yeah, so no, that was wonderful. Thank you. My name's Amelia Cotter, and I'm an author, researcher, and storyteller. I'm here in Chicago, but I'm originally from Maryland, and I'm the author of 5 books. I actually have my own bio queued up, so I'm referencing it as I talk. I'm the author of 5 books, mostly about paranormal, true paranormal encounters, folklore, haunted history, as well as poetry and children's. And I have written for a lot of different publications. So I've been a research contributor to Haunted Magazine, The Feminine Macabre, The Morbid Curious, as well as some just regular magazines like Frederick Magazine and things like that. I have been on Coast to Coast AM. I've been on Travel Channel's Hometown Horror. I've been on Really Channel's The RIP Files, as well as in the documentary Scary Stories, and Tinker's Shadow, The Hidden History of Tinker's Swiss Cottage, which I hosted. And I have dabbled in other areas of TV as well. I've been a tour guide in Chicago for about a decade. So with Chicago Hauntings Ghost Tours, as well as my own private tours. I have won some awards for my writing and done other cool stuff too. And so I'm just really excited to be here. Thank you.
All that
finally
cool
to get together.
Excited to be on here.
Yeah, no, this is super cool. I have just straight out of the gate.
I am. We've had to reschedule so many times. Yeah.
I knew you were in Chicago, but I didn't know that you did all of those, tours and stuff. I have never been to Chicago. My wife has, and she absolutely loves it. It's her favorite place. Do you do non-paranormal tours as well?
I don't. So mostly what I do is in the realm of hidden history and haunted history. So there's a little bit of some true crime history folded into it, but I mostly stay in the lane of ghost stuff for my particular tours. But there are so many different types of tours to choose from, and they're all amazing.
Yeah, I'm pretty not familiar outside of the wrestling scene in Chicago and I don't know, the Bean. I don't really know a whole lot else about Chicago.
You need to have your wife reevaluate her favorite city.
Literally, there's this big giant Chicago painted mural on the bedroom wall. It's almost as big as my TV. and that's wild. Like she just absolutely loves the place. I've never
Oh, that's
been.
awesome.
Yeah.
I love Chicago, so I didn't know a whole lot about it before I moved here either. I just moved here after college on a whim with a friend. So, and then I totally fell in love with it. So Chicago has an awesome history, and it's also a great place to live. So it's not as easy as it used to be because it is getting more expensive along with everything else, but it's pretty livable city.
The last time I was in Chicago, I watched my sister throw up 2 times in a hotel elevator after eating Italian beef sandwiches. So
that does,
that's my,
yeah, that can happen.
That's my last experience. So
that is a hazard. That's a hazard of the city. The food and beverage.
Yeah.
I was gonna go to Chicago with you actually, JC, years ago when they had that All In show. And
that's what I'm talking about. That was the last time I was there.
And I wasn't able to secure a ticket, and it ended up because David Arquette had bought the seat next to you, and the event that we were going to go to, I wasn't able to attend because David Arquette, of all people, had taken my seat.
I was sitting next to David Arquette and his wife.
Wow,
and
that is
David. I just want to say, like, I was never really obsessed with David Arquette, like as an actor or anything, but he was so nice. Nice
really
guy.
Cool.
He was like buying beers for everybody, and it was just a good time. Like, he was cool.
Still my enemy for taking my seat at that event, but I super digress right now.
That's fine.
So you had mentioned that you also, sprinkle in a little of the true crime stuff. Now, so is that kind of like Al Capone type stuff?
That is exactly what it is. So I have done a lot of research on Al Capone just because there's controversy in the paranormal community and also in sort of like the crime history community in Chicago. Just a lot of controversy about the life and death of Al Capone and his spirit haunting. He's one of those people whose spirit is supposed to haunt every single hotel and bar. And I was always very annoyed by that notion. And sort of, it's very easy to spread like false information and bad history. And a lot of what you see on Google or TikTok and social media, and even on the tours, is just this retelling of like bad information. And so I wanted to do some digging myself into the actual, and just learn more for myself about like the lore, some of the history, the historical sites. Like I live very close to the site of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. But then also kind of dig into like why people are so fascinated by Al Capone and why he comes up all the time and why, I mean, obviously he's associated with Chicago history, gang and crime history is obviously attractive and exciting to people. But the city has really done a lot to erase a lot of the gangland and organized crime history. So it's just a really fascinating like relationship that Chicago has with Al Capone, and that some of the paranormal investigators here have with him. People either are like obsessed with Al Capone haunts this place, or they're like, I never want to hear his name again. So it's interesting.
Al Capone is so interesting because while he was extorting people for money, he was also providing for soup kitchens and places like that, like during, the Depression and post-Depression period.
Right. He was fairly progressive in some of those.
He was.
In some of his ideals, he supported Black musicians. I mean, there was a lot of things that he did, and he was like a folk hero of his time in a way too. People really liked him. So, I'm fast. I went from being somebody who was annoyed every time I heard his name as well to being somebody now who's like a tried and true kind of like Capone fan in my own way.
That's not good. Okay. I don't know if anyone heard that crack of thunder, but
we've been just devastated with
it's about to happen
with these storms. Where
are you guys located?
He is.
I'm in Cleveland.
Oh, and cool. I'm in like Pennsylvania, kind of like central PA, but
It's BFEPA.
Oh, cool.
yeah, every storm that comes through.
Where? Because my parents live in York, Pennsylvania.
Okay, I don't think
That's
I'm
a little
quite,
bit further.
Yeah, I'm not quite that far. I'm basically an hour and a half from State College, and then an hour.
He's like in the middle of the state. Like, do you know where
Yeah.
St. Mary's is? Penn State, around that area.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I'm like equal distance from Pittsburgh and Penn State. I'm just kind of like right in the middle in all the cornfield.
Gotcha.
But we're both originally from like right around Pittsburgh, and all the storms that like come through and tear him up have just been making their way over to me. And like last week we went like days without power. There was like 24,000 people without power, and I had to go like buy all these like coolers, like the igloo coolers and stuff, because all of our food kept going bad. So
and then you went and rebought food, and then the power went out again.
Yeah, as soon as I get home and put stuff away, we lose power again. So yeah, thunder.
Isn't that the way?
Yeah, these storms are kicking our butts right now. But so I'm not. How do I phrase this? I am super interested in kind of this lore that you're talking about. That like all of these places claim that Al Capone haunts it. I'm not surprised that something like that exists, but I was just super unaware of it. So you got into it and you started kind of like research it a little bit. Are there certain places that you are able to debunk as like, now they're just making this up to like be a tourist trap, or is there any place in particular that you feel like there might be some actual, credibility to the claim?
So, two of the most common places that people associate with Capone's ghost are the Congress Hotel and the Green Mill Jazz Club. The Green Mill is not, and the Green Mill itself is very touristy, but it's not ghost hunter friendly. So they were like definitely speakeasy. There's tunnels under the bar. That's all confirmed. That's not like urban legend or anything. But then people just automatically, once they hear speakeasy, once they hear tunnels, they think of Capone. And so they're like, yeah, Capone owned this place and he frequented here. And neither of those things are true. That's just patently untrue. There's also plenty of gangsters around the city that are not as famous as Capone that did frequent these places. That's still very cool, right? And then as far as the Congress Hotel is concerned, like he probably passed through a few times, a handful of times or whatever in his travels around the city, but he did not own it. He never owned the Congress Hotel. He didn't have a special room that he stayed there or anything. These are sort of like how the stories or the games of telephone kind of get conflated. Someplace that he was associated with was the Lexington Hotel, which has been completely torn down. The Lexington Hotel is where Geraldo had his famous episode where he like opened the vault and there was nothing in it. It's long gone now. It's long gone. So, and then there's some interesting like gems of places where like some places in Chinatown that are just not really remarkable to us now. They're not remarkable landmarks, but that were like, meeting places and things like that. I've been to his house on Prairie Avenue, which is on the south side. Not like in it, because it's right now it's empty and being restored, but I've been down there. But his ghost isn't super active as far as, in my opinion, and $5 will get us a cup of coffee. But I don't know that his ghost is super active, but there are a lot of gangland, as sort of gangster era places that are quite haunted, but it just doesn't, people rush to believe it's Al Capone. And if you see a ghost of somebody in a pinstripe suit with an a gruff Italian accent, that doesn't really mean anything, because that's how every guy dressed in the 1920s, right? Yeah. So, it's sort of like putting it into perspective. But of course, we all, we want to believe that he's around, and he was the kind of guy who loved attention. So I'm sure if you try to call him up, I'm sure that he will, he'd be glad to make an appearance. So.
So I've never really considered like the ghost of Al Capone, because it's not, I mean, maybe some people talk about it, but it's not something that like I've heard a lot about.
Huge thing in Chicago, in the Chicago
yeah.
Paranormal community. People are really proud of it. There's a lot of other places in the Midwest too that claim to be haunted by it, because there's a wide network of places that were involved in Prohibition and that were involved.
Sure. Yeah.
These, and so there's places as far as Minnesota and Wisconsin and Indiana that are also associated with Capone. Like, oh, Capone stayed here, or Capone owned the place, or Capone frequented here. And if you add all these places up, you're like, man, this guy did nothing but drive around the Midwest in his car and, have a drink at all these different places. It would be physically impossible for him to be at every single one of these places and to own all of them. But he did have a cabin in Mercer, Wisconsin. I think I'm getting that name right. Up in like north central Wisconsin. So there's some stops along the way where people have family memories of people meeting him. So not on the ghostly side of things. Yes, he's supposed to haunt all these places along the way, but people have really cool family memories of encountering somebody that they thought was him, or the man himself. And then other famous gangsters like Babyface Nelson and John Dillinger and people like that. So it's pretty cool.
Frank Nitti, Bugs Moran. There's a whole, well, it's funny. And Drew, Katanning, Pennsylvania, back in the early 2000s, somebody owned his private pistol, which was nicknamed Sweetheart. And it was actually stored for a while at First National Bank down in Katanning, right down on Main Street there, Drew.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, it was a 38 special. It was like he kept it on his person, but it sold. The last time it sold was in 2007, and it sold for $20,000.
Oh man!
Just a 38 special. I mean, a 38 special you can go buy at the gun store for like what, $150 for like a entry level one. $20,000.
When they had the auction in 2021, when they auctioned off items from his estate, I watched the whole thing and I was like, I'm going to bid on stuff. And my husband was like, are you insane? The starting bids for these things are hundreds and then thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
The lowest thing that went for, I think, like $400. And I had my hand on the button, and Jonathan was like dabbing his price, like, oh my God, what are you doing? And I could have gotten it. I could have gotten it. It was a set of photos, which also, I mean, like, what do I need to do? Why do I need to have somebody's family photos? I acknowledge it's not good, not healthy, but it's funny because I came very close to like slamming the
that would be cool. It would be so cool to have though, because like you can replace your own family pictures with Al Capone's, and then when people come over, they'll be like, "What is this?"
Just like sprinkle it in there, right? They'll never, they might know, they might not know. So
now there are a lot of his like home movie reels. Like we're dating ourselves here a little bit, when they filmed on a reel of film that seemed like they got cut up and just sold. Because like you can even go, like if you go on eBay, you can find like 30-second film of like something he filmed in like a barbecue in his backyard or something. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. Mm-hmm. But like people just keep chopping it up in smaller pieces and selling it, and that's not a good thing.
That's what they did with the bricks from the wall of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre site too. They sold off all the bricks. As recently as like 7 or 8 years ago, I was at like a paranormal convention where somebody was selling bricks from, with the certificates of authenticity. And I was like, this is snake oil, like total snake oil.
Yeah, that's
so
crazy.
It was really, I was like, wow, this person also has like the audacity too, because there's a lot of overlap with, history buffs and nerds and stuff. You'd think that they would get called out real fast for doing something like that, but they were selling bricks. So
the paranormal community seems to be so willing to just be had. Like I don't understand it, because with so much of what we do and what our interests are, and how it comes under fire constantly from non-believers and mainstream media and everything else, like you would think that the people who are enthused by this as a hobby would have some semblance of like some type of guard up for that type of stuff,
right?
But it just is
right,
the
like
worst.
A modicum of actual investigation skills, like you think I agree, but people really, they take that old saying, I want to believe, they take it very seriously, and so I agree.
I mean, if I came home with a brick with a certificate that said it was from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, like, of course I'm going to show that off, whether it's real or not. Here's a certificate some dude printed off and gave me a brick.
Right. Yeah.
But I paid for it, so it's real.
Exactly. It's authentic. It's a brick, right?
Yeah, it's a brick. I mean, I could pull a brick out on my sidewalk and be like, all right, here's a brick from the Cleveland day. What was the thing with the balloons where they released the balloons and people died because there were so many balloons?
That's right. I've heard I mean,
it's not funny. It's not funny that like the innocent people died, but it's just funny that Cleveland like can't even like, it was in 1988, I think. They released all these balloons in celebration of like Cleveland's like 150th anniversary or something. And the balloons ended up like popping and stuff. And they went down like on people in boats and in the water, and like people were dying. I think like 6 people died.
Nuts. I've never heard that.
I heard there's an episode, I think, about that on the Cautionary Tales podcast.
There is. Yep.
It's familiar to me. The story you're telling is familiar, and I think I heard it on that podcast. So
yeah. We also have a 5-cent beer night, but that's a whole different.
That's
like this.
That's
like
great.
the 70s.
That's a plus.
It was baseball game, Indians at the time, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna do 5-cent beer night." Well, everybody got drunk. Fans were fighting the Indians, like. Cleveland fans were fighting their own team.
Geez.
And then like the baseball teams were teaming up to fight the fans. Like it was crazy.
Wow. Boy.
Just don't give a we can't do 5-cent beer nights anymore.
No,
sorry, everybody.
I remember dollar cocktails at Applebee's for a while, and I felt like that.
They still do it. They still do it.
Oh my.
$1 margaritas, the dollaritas.
Dollar teenies.
Absolutely.
We can't get this in the city. I have to travel out in order to experience this wonder that is the dollar cocktail.
Well, I'll tell you, it's basically just because I worked there for a while. They just throw everything into a giant, just like igloo mug kind of thing, like one of those big coolers.
Oh yeah.
And they just kind of like when somebody orders it, they press the button and just pours out, and then they just take it. They don't.
But it's like it's almost endless though, because if you have $10, you can have 10 of those, and whether or not it's watered down or not, after 10, you're gonna have a pretty good buzz going.
Yeah. Oh, but as much as I love talking about Applebee's, and I can tell you some horror stories about Applebee's.
Different kind of horror.
Different episode. That's a different episode.
There's something that I wanted to kind of come back to with the ghost of Capone before I forget it, because I think there's an interesting dichotomy to that, where so many people were claiming that he haunts areas of Chicago or whatever. He died in Florida, right? Or am I misremembering that?
That is correct. So he died on his estate in Florida. And that was in 1947. So he died at home there after being released from prison. He was there for a while, like a little while, before he died of like advanced end stage syphilis. Yeah, like tertiary syphilis and long-term cocaine use. But he was with his family. And he was kicking it
Okay.
at the end there. You know, he was enjoying he enjoyed his last, you know, his last days with his family. But you're right. So that's interesting too. Like begs the question of like why ghosts haunt certain places, and if they can haunt more than one place, because there's other famous spirits that have been seen in more than one location, like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and people like that. So, and I have heard a few stories, but very like vague stories about that estate, which has also been torn down, being haunted from some of his family members that had visited. So I'm going to cough.
You good?
Excuse me. And but no detail, just that they encountered what they felt was the spirit there, and it got torn down in like 2022, so very recently. And the people that lived out there, the historical society out there on that island, were trying desperately to save it, but it's worth the property is worth more with nothing on it now than it was with his property on it. So
jeez.
Wow.
Wasn't am I mistaken that Scarface, the movie, was based off of Al Capone?
I think the original.
His nickname was Scarface because he did have that scar, but I don't know how much the movie was true to his actual.
Well,
I believe
it wouldn't have been because Scarface was Cuban and he came in from, but it was an adapted story, right? Like from Al Capone.
The original Scarface, which was made like many years prior to the 80s film, was
it was in like
was
the one
based
it was in like
on
the 50s.
Yeah, was based on Capone, and then I think they just kind of
borrowed. I just had like a brain fart and was thinking of something completely different. But yeah, like Al Pacino Scarface. Yes. All right.
Sorry.
I'm caught up. I'm caught up now.
There's a loose association though, but there was, like Drew said, there was a Scarface. I think it was like in the mid or late 50s. That was
like
specifically
straight
focused.
up like adapted from him.
And I was thinking of something else, like a show recently that had a title similar to that, or like
the George Lopez show.
Don't laugh. You don't have to mercy laugh for him. Nobody else has
courtesy chuckle.
I'll just edit the boos and the jeers later.
Yeah, the laugh track.
But so I guess my question is, based on your research, because we've had a lot of conversations with people about paranormal research, hauntings, and, you know, all of the things that go with it. But I don't know if we've ever kind of really delved into the idea of, you know, like what actually may cause, you know, a haunting, or what would draw a spirit to be one place at one time, versus, you know, the dying in Florida and deciding they're going to go back to Chicago. So like, kind of based on your knowledge and research, like, how do you feel about that? Is that something that you kind of see as a possibility, or?
I do. And so like, I don't position myself as an authority on this stuff. Like I'm a storyteller. I'm an interpreter. The research that I do is kind of around like the value of ghost stories. And so I'm just as excited as everybody else to know the answers to these questions. But what I've seen, like patterns that I've seen in people's paranormal experiences, is that, you know, a ghost can kind of be anywhere. Like some spirits do seem to be attached to one place or an object or person. And that could be for the reasons that we've all heard, right? Some sort of tragic emotional event, or like a strong bond of love or something like that. Like a spirit might haunt a house because they loved that house and continue to be there after their life has ended. But there is like there's some truth to the idea, and what I've heard from people who claim to be mediums and things like that, that, you know, when you can summon, and I don't mean that in like a woo-woo sense, but like, you know, spirits can travel and they can be present in different locations, and you can call them up. You can request their presence the way that you might at a seance or a Ouija board or something like that. But also, it just in some of these locations where people really want to experience a certain person. Like there's I've done a lot of research also, obviously, on the Old Baraboo Inn in Wisconsin, which is an example of a place where they're always trying to contact Al Capone, and they believe that they have made contact with his spirit. And it seems that the reason they've made contact with his spirit is because they have asked him to be present. They have energetically all connected together and asked for his presence. And he's the kind of person that loves attention. And might show up. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think the answer is, yes, anything seems to be possible or plausible.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your take on that. It's just something that just here in that moment that I realized like we've never really kind of really emphasized any of it. So I thought that was an interesting, especially piggybacking off of Al Capone. But I mean, you don't, and you just talked about Wisconsin and whatnot, but you have like experience in other places too, right? You said that I think you were originally from Maryland, right? Is that why you ended up writing the book? Yeah, is this where this all started for you? Like
and that's a good point. So there's another place. So I am originally from Maryland, and that's why I wrote Maryland Ghosts, which is like an homage to Maryland hauntings. And when I was in college, I lived in Frederick, Maryland, which is a really cool, like Civil War town. And I worked at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, which is like one of the coolest museums that you could ever go to, and very haunted. So the building itself had been a funeral home and coffin like manufacturing facility. And then later was turned into, it was a place where they had like the last intact, like Confederate surgical tent and all sorts of, and like dentist chairs, all sorts of really interesting things. And so a lot of spirits, a lot of the spirits that people encountered there were like Civil War soldiers and things that were maybe called to the content, called to the place because of the objects, called to the place because of people thinking, and high levels of emotion all the time surrounding this material and everything. So it was a fascinating experience to work there. And Maryland's just a really cool state, very cool historic state just in general. And I was really lucky. I grew up there and got to like explore abandoned places when I was a teenager and just kind of have a lot of fun.
Yeah, actually, I love Maryland. The eastern, the Panhandle side's cool. We'll cut out the middle, and then
fair enough.
And then the Delmarva Peninsula part.
Yeah.
But we're speaking of Civil War medicine. So Civil War medicine was kind of like, hey, Jimmy, you got a slug in your leg. We're going to have to cut you off up here at the pelvis. Sorry, bite down on this lemon. We don't have anesthetics.
So I'm so glad you said that, because it segues to my TED talk about this topic. But so it's 95% of people who received some type of surgical care actually did receive anesthesia. So it is a bit of an old, like biting the bullet absolutely comes from this era.
What anesthetic were they using?
So they would have used chloroform or ether or a combination of both. And they were usually administered through a funnel. So people, and this would have happened. So really good Civil War surgeons would have been able to do an amputation in under 90 seconds. And, they would, this is really incredible. Like, Jonathan Letterman developed the triage system. This is when they first invented like plastic surgery and like the corrective surgery sense and everything. Mm-hmm. But they were able to, in addition to the biting the bullet and the whiskey, taking a shot of whiskey and then like hoping for the best. Usually the convalescing part was like the part where you were probably going to die, when rats were eating at your flesh wounds and things like that. But the actual surgery part itself was pretty clinical, and 95% received some type of anesthesia. So the other 5% were the not so lucky ones. They set up these, a lot of field hospitals and everything. And, you see the pictures of like piles of arms and limbs and things like that. But they did it. I mean, this is the first time women were nurses, because that was a male profession up until that time. But since everybody was conscripted, they had to have women handling nursing. I mean, it's just fascinating. Like all of the medical advancements that took place just in that brief like 5-year window.
And we barely even knew about like bacteria and stuff yet. Like that was just evolving.
Right. They had
so.
exactly. Yeah. Like just, not cleaning surgical instruments, to modern standards, things that they had no clue about, that they were botching horrifically. But then at the same time, like providing this level of care that was just like unknown before that. It's just really cool. So.
And it was borrowed. It was actually borrowed a lot. The French and the Germans in World War I borrowed all of their medical knowledge from doctors and their research and stuff from the Civil War. That was all taken for World War I.
Right. It's so
for better or worse, but
yeah, no, it's just a lot of the seeds of medical advancement came out of that from the Civil War era. So
yeah, especially surgical stuff for sure.
Yes.
I don't have a lot.
Sorry, Drew. We were way off.
Yeah, no, I don't know nearly as much about. I don't know.
I'll demonstrate it to you live.
Okay,
next time we're in person.
Everything that I know about the Civil War, I know from watching like movies,
History
basically.
Channel.
It's just like, it's not that I'm like super uneducated or anything. It's just like, so Civil War, the paranormal, the Blue Boy. I don't remember.
Gettysburg. Yeah.
Gettysburg. So like, that's kind of where my Civil War interest, like I know like there's like this huge market actually for like old Civil War medical stuff, and I think there's actually a shop in Chicago that has like all of this like macabre Civil War era trinkets and surgical stuff. But like the actual like the paranormal studies side of it is kind of where I've always kind of been drawn to it, and the Blue Boy is one that always sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, the Blue Boy and the experience that the people had when they were in an elevator, and when the doors opened, it opened to like an old Civil War hospital instead of like
yeah.
I remember growing up with those stories too before I even went to Gettysburg, and hearing about those. It's really really wild.
I should go to Gettysburg. I actually don't live that far away. It's I have geologic, like there's such a, I'm like an hour and a half from literally everything. Like I don't know how it is, but I could be in Maryland in less than that. You guys, Brett, we're talking about Maryland. I think I'm like 45 minutes away from Cumberland, Maryland.
Oh, the border? Yeah, you just go south on 15. Just go south on 15. You'll be right
I'm
there.
like 45 minutes away from Maryland. I'm like an hour away from Gettysburg. I've never been there. But
this guy, he says that, but then he'll drive like 5 hours out to my house in January during the middle of like the worst winter storm we've ever had, just to film like a 2-hour documentary in one day.
Yeah.
I mean, you have priorities, yeah.
Right. It's something that, I mean, I don't know. This just like drawing straws at this point, but I know that you talked about some like UFO stuff in Maryland, and now I mean we're talking Civil War here, and I'm just curious if you like, are you aware of any like Civil War era ufology or like UFO encounters at all?
Not. Excuse me. Hold on. Sorry. So I just in the last year or two, I would say, have gotten really into stories about UFO encounters and things like that. I'm just sort of on the brink of my studying and my interest in that. And I know that there are stories that go back to that time that were described in a way that, we're not how we would describe it now. I feel like most UFO encounters that are coherently like written down, started like in the early 20th century. And again, I am not an expert on this particular thing, so I could be completely wrong, but that's just like the impression that I've had. I have wondered that often myself, and I find that really interesting because it would be difficult. How would you misinterpret something that is like a flying saucer? How would you describe it? How would you apprehend that if you encountered it? But yeah, so I don't really know, but from what I've heard from listening to other people who know a lot about it, it wasn't really written about until around like the turn of the 20th century, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to even, well, I mean, you say that it would be difficult to like comprehend, but there were some really good science fiction that was written right around that same time, right? Isn't that around when the Time Machine was published?
Right, like
yeah.
the Industrial Revolution kind of stuff, like it's fascinating. And it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Like, so I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
Well, even War of the Worlds is about, we're about 30 years off from that in the Civil War, but it's still pretty close. I did like a cursory search. The only thing I'm getting is an Ancient Aliens episode. I think it's just, it's one of those weird periods, like during wars, even if people would have said, oh, look at what is that thing in the sky? Like they eventually just forget about it because they're being shot at,
Right.
the next day.
Right.
I don't think it's really until World War II that we really start this, like, okay, there's some weird stuff in the sky, some weird stuff going on.
Right.
The Nazis were experimenting with time travel and stuff like that.
It's well documented on our show, but I had a UFO encounter, and 2017, I saw 3 of them, and it was like an experience that kind of changed me as a human. It's without getting super into it, because I have talked about it in depth on other episodes.
It's been a while though, so
it has been a while. So
go ahead and take the next 30 minutes.
I'm gonna surmise it so that we don't do that. But it was, believe it or not, July 4th, 2017, and I talked to, Preston Dennett. I talked to Preston Dennett about this, and he told me that it's actually pretty common to see sightings on July 4th. And that was one thing that, like, for me, I was always like, well, it was July 4th. And the reason I started paying attention to this was because I thought I was seeing a firework, and then I wasn't seeing a firework. So, like, and it happened right here in this town that I live in. And I was actually walking. I had at the time, a client of mine, and we were like walking him over to where he was staying at the time. And, I just kind of like out up in the sky, like I just see this light kind of start to real slowly, like just kind of come up. And I'm like, oh, dude, somebody's setting off fireworks. So we stop and we look, and then it just kind of hangs there. Almost kind of like a Chinese lantern, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so for this like whole time, I'm sitting there and we're just like waiting for something to happen and waiting for something to happen, and nothing happens, and it just kind of stays there. And then it turns into 3 of them. Like they just kind of separated, and then they started to kind of do like this, just flying around like rhythmically a little bit. And, one would go do its own thing, and then one would go do its own thing. So it lasted for like 45 minutes. And eventually they came back together and then shot off really fast and just disappeared forever. But he was absolutely terrified. And the whole time I was standing there, and I was like, I can't believe what I'm trying to rationalize, like, what was that? Is that what I think it is, or what I hope it is? Like, how can this? I reached out to MUFON, and there was like nothing that MUFON could conclude that would have caused it. That there were no like Air Force things going on, or and drones obviously were a thing at the time, but back there in that time frame, they weren't quite.
It was very early drone.
It was very early drone, and you still needed to have a license to fly at a certain height, and there were no like licensed
Right.
operators, and so MUFON couldn't figure anything out about it, so it was just unidentified. So, but all I can say from my experience is that while it was happening, I felt something personally. Like
Mhm.
I felt like I was drawn to see it. Like it went up into the sky, and we didn't just happen to see it, but like I was called upon to see it. So I
Mhm.
almost felt like they were there for me to witness. And while I was witnessing it, like I had this weird just like sensation that had like come over me, like a peace, like just this peace overcame me. And just a small portion of me kind of is sad that I haven't seen it again. It's the wildest thing. But yeah, that's I won't take up too much more time on it. But yeah, so like UFOs in particular, it's something that I'm deeply interested in because even though I had just brief encounters and like I was abducted, we've talked to people who have had abduction experiences and like way more deep relationships with potential aliens and extraterrestrials. But like that 45 minutes that I got to spend possibly seeing something changed who I am, and it's wild. So I
Yeah.
just any UFO related content or story or anything, that's my bag.
I love so if have you ever listened to the Strange Skies, Our Strange Skies podcast? It's not going on anymore. It's all but there's hundreds of episodes where it's like a storytelling show that recalls experiences from around the world that are well documented, different countries, like long-term studies or just like these flaps or whatever, where people saw this one year in Argentina when people saw, there were 50 encounters, and it just like what you're describing sounds really similar to a lot of other people's experiences. This sense of calm, this sense of like meaning, this sense of like connection with it, and that's really, I mean, that's really cool. It's really like magical, and it's also terrifying. I think like UFOs are the thing that people can sort of wrap their minds around the least because they're in the sky. So you're like, okay, it's intangible. And why isn't everybody else seeing it if it's in the sky? Why am only I experiencing this? So you're more likely to doubt yourself. But that's really interesting. And like my family members, I don't think I've had one, or I don't remember if I did, but my family members, my aunt, my uncle, and my mom have all had UFO experiences throughout their life, and vivid ones that they recall in great detail. And I can't recall in great detail what happened like yesterday, but they can recall this thing they saw when they're like 16. So it's really fascinating. Like, I thank
my
you for
mom
sharing that. So
Oh, yeah, no
no,
problem.
my mom had one in the late 70s when she was still young. Uh, but I'll skip the whole story. They saw the UFO, and like everybody, the family were in like the family car, and for weeks after that, like my grandfather would not let any of them talk on the phone to anybody.
oh wow.
Like if somebody called on the phone, he would answer, and he would like nobody was allowed to talk about it because they didn't want it getting out that we saw things in the sky and we were crazy.
Right,
You know?
right. Yeah. Or if like somebody's listening, right? If somebody, because then all the people that have these weird experiences and they go home and then somebody shows up, a day or two later
Yeah.
at the door,
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
Not even
Yeah.
a lot. But then my mom, we did a Christmas episode 2 years ago. I was on another podcast with my mom, and my mom just drops out of nowhere. Oh yeah, her grandmother, my great grandmother. Yeah, she told me one time that she was levitating in bed and hearing voices. I'm like, what?
Merry Christmas.
Like, what are you
Thanks.
You're dropping this on me now?
Right. Like that seems like a relevant story to maybe
So
go into
my
some more
great
detail
grandmother,
about.
my great grandmother was in some cahoots with Satan or something. I don't.
That old chestnut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to experience any type of Men in Black situation or any type of paranoia after. What I will say is, so I had a client, and I was working home health at the time, and so he had a roommate that lived in this house with him, and there was another staff member there, and they were not present. They were off doing a different thing. And when we got back to the house, the event was still happening. And my phone, I had like an old like iPhone 5, and I just felt like I wasn't getting good enough picture with it because I was. And JC has this phone. It's broken. All of the footage is still there. It's on this phone right there. You can see my shattered phone right there.
Oh, wow.
It's all on there, but I just don't have access to it. And I go in and I'm like, hey, this is going to sound weird, but what kind of phone do you have? And how's the resolution when you're recording? Because there's something weird going on out there. And the other staff looks at the client, and she goes, hey, it's back. And they came outside and they watched it too. So when they were driving back to the house from whatever party they were at, they saw this like up in the sky as well, wherever they were at.
Wow.
And so all four of us came out and we like finished watching it, and they were visibly scared, weirded out. The one client that to this day I'm still close with, he was like rationalizing that, well, there's no such thing as aliens. It's not a UFO. Whatever we saw, I don't know, but God, like he got into like this super religious thing, and I was just like, okay, man, you just process that however you need to process it. But we saw something special, man, and that's like,
right.
Even if you're frightened by that, it doesn't have to shatter your existence just to sit back and be like, we are super lucky that we got to experience that. And tomorrow you wake up and you just go about your life goes on no matter what. You just go about your day, or cope with what we saw however you need to. But man, I will never.
It turns out that Drew had this entire life-changing experience over a Chinese lantern.
If that's what it was, man, I don't even care, because
as long as it works, then it
And 13 years later, he's still talking about it.
UFO placebo.
Right.
But
anyways,
yeah,
we're way off topic. Let's reel it in.
Yeah,
this is great. I love this.
I wanted, before we run out of time, and I will always have you back on to talk about ghosts or UFOs or whatever. We're SasqWatchers. For the longest time, we didn't talk about Sasquatch, despite the name. I want to ask about the Breakfast with Bigfoot book and how that came to be, just so that we could talk some Squatch.
So I wrote that book before any of my other paranormal books. I wanted to be a children's book author. I did not think I was going to get into any of this in the way that I am now. I just wanted a book. And I originally wrote Breakfast with Bigfoot years before I started publishing. It is based loosely on the Albert Ostman experience of 1924, where the prospector in British Columbia was abducted by a family of big feet, and he was carried, back to this Bigfoot lair where there was a mom, dad, and a boy and girl Bigfoot that looked after him for 6 days, and then he escaped, and then didn't talk about it for 30 years. And then came forward with his story. And I always got such a huge kick out of that story and out of his experience. So I wrote it's just a children's book, a nice children's book about safety when you're hiking in the woods and things like that. And it was not the first book that I published, because the publisher had such a long drawn out process with the first illustrator was fired. It was a weird, publishing drama. The first illustrator was fired and all this other stuff. And I ended up taking the completed package. Charles Swinford illustrated the final version, which are these adorable illustrations. That ended up going to a new publisher because in the time it took this publisher to figure out what they were doing with it, they actually went out of business. So I know, right? The book was cursed. So it ended up being like my third book, even though I wrote it way before I ever thought I was going to be a paranormal researcher and somebody who talked about this kind of stuff. So anyway, it's close to my heart for that reason. And I sell the vast majority of copies that I sell of the book are to adults who are just Bigfoot collectors and enthusiasts who pick it up at an event, at a conference, at my table, and they're like, "This is adorable. Yeah, sure, I'm going to take this." And so, yeah, it's I love it. And then I tell people, I'm like, it is based on a true story, so it has there's some gravitas to it, I guess, but
some brevity, yeah.
Yeah.
So how I'm gonna rewind real quick, some years back. How did you get in to even the entire paranormal scene? Like, why? Like, how did you? I mean, a lot of people get into a lot of stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, like, here's paranormal.
I was just fascinated by it from a very early age. It was a hyper fixation that I latched onto when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I loved ghost stories. I loved scary movies. Mm-hmm. My family was very spooky adjacent. And so we were the kind of family that was always telling ghost stories. Uncles, aunts, people were always had a cool ghost story to tell. When you went somewhere, I was attracted to abandoned places. I just loved it. I just loved spooky stuff. And again, when I was in high school, I wasn't like I didn't party with the cool kids. Like, we drove around at night and went to cemeteries and snuck around old places. And I loved it. Like, I loved every minute of it.
The police dodge game at the cemeteries, right?
Exactly. And I just loved history, and it just I just felt so connected to like the world, through this interest. And so when I moved to Chicago, I wanted to get involved in like a ghost hunting group. And there was actually the Chicago Ghost Hunters group, which was a meetup group at the time. Remember Meetup? I feel like that's still probably a thing, but it was like a big thing around like 2010. Like,
it was.
Yeah. And so I joined up with them and ended up then getting sort of connected into like there's a was and still is a very close knit community in Chicagoland and Illinois, Midwest with like the people who are involved in the paranormal. So, and then at the same time, I was like starting to write. So I was diagnosed with cancer right after I graduated from college, like a month after I graduated. And so I had to move. I moved home with my parents, and I went through treatment, and I had this like big sort of like, I'm going to move to the big city and follow my dreams kind of moment. And so I started getting involved in publishing right away as well. And then eventually it became obvious that the two things, paranormal and writing, were going to merge. And I mean, I was really young. So now I'm very strategic about all the things that I do. At the time, I was just sort of like, this is neat. And it just happened to really work out. So, but yeah, it was a cool journey.
I feel like the Midwest is a special place in this country that like is overlooked for a lot of different things because it's such a vast area. I mean, you go all the way from like the butt end, Kansas, the whole way over to where I'm at in Cleveland, which I debate with myself whether Cleveland is Midwest.
Technically, Ohio is Midwest, so
it is technically.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people with like the Midwestern accent here, mostly women. I notice it in, but sometimes I notice it in guys. There's a lot of that, like, oh, like the exaggerated O and A and things like that. That like then people like hear me say mum and they think it's weird, like mum. That's my mum. And then people are like, oh, you're saying it with a U instead of an O. And anyways.
That's true. I did hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go. No. But the Midwest is like a special place. Hoagie. But it is because like the Midwest is like the Dust Bowl, Tornado Alley, all these like random events and stuff, but everything's kind of scattered out, right? Like it's not like concentrated in certain cities and stuff. Maybe Chicago a little bit, but there's just this vast amount of land and area and stories and people's interactions and stuff that like we never even talk about.
Right. It's very
like who's talking about Oklahoma City or like Kansas City or something, you know? Like it's
all these places are really rich in lore too, and just it's they're like untapped kind of like resources. You know, there's so much cool stuff.
Yep. Definitely.
But yeah, you know what? I would love to have you back at some point and actually get a little.
I feel like we barely even touched.
Yeah. You know, get deeper into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was a good chat and everything, but we hit that hour mark, and you know, we always like to let the guest have the last, you know, minute or a couple of minutes to like, you know, really drive home your stuff.
Plug it.
So plug away, promote. Grift until you can't grift anymore. That's my motto.
Excellent. All right. For sure. So I love to connect with people. And you can find me on Facebook, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Amelia M. Cotter. So the M is very important. Amelia M. Cotter. You can visit my website, ameliacotter.com, has all of my books and writing and again, all the ways to connect with me. I am going to be doing some fun stuff coming up. I'll be on May 31st, I'll be at helping out with leading a paranormal investigation at the Old Lake County Jail and Sheriff's House in Crown Point, Indiana. I'll be at the Chicago Paranormal Convention in June. I will be at the Rock Island Roadhouse Esoteric Expo in October, as well as Days of the Dead Chicago Horror Convention in November. And so I'll be kind of around. So I'll be in this area, but I'll be making the rounds, and it would be great to meet people in person as well. So please connect with me. I do love to connect. M is important. Thank you. Yes, at Amelia M. Cotter, because
that's right. I accidentally put Carter, and I realized my mistake as I was hitting. I'm sorry.
It's because of him.
I messed up. I fixed it though. So Amelia M. Cotter on social media. The M is important.
Yes. It's important because there's another Amelia Cotter out there who does not want to be bothered with any of this.
Well, I'm going to bother her. So
yeah.
She just likes to.
We'll have her on next. She's our next episode.
Right. Yeah. Have her on as a guest. That's true.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that was a good episode. You know, check it out. All of her stuff. I don't think the books look interesting. I might be adding the Breakfast with Bigfoot to my Bigfoot collection.
Yay, please do.
Absolutely.
I'm one of those nerdy people that saw it, and I was like, "Ooh, that's cute. That would go next. Great to my let's see here, Sasquatch pizza." Pull this off the wall here. I have this little guy from a Sasquatch pizza box that
oh my gosh,
taped to my wall here. So yeah, I do like the weird Sasquatch collecting.
Excellent.
Yeah, but yeah, check her out, and we'll go ahead. We'll hit the outro, and yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
We're reaching the end. Kids are still that groove. Thanks for tuning in. We're in the sky from the start till now. We've been having a blast, so put on your dancing shoes. It's time to skate fast. We've got a request, a little favor to ask. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up and clap. Subscribe to our channel. Join the Sky Nation. We'll keep spreading the rhythm. Worldwide sensation. Thanks for tuning in.
Dude,
Thanks
she
for
had she had the
squatching.
she had